this will get sorted out.
Hi, my name is Reid Spencer. I'm the VP of Technology for Improving Ottawa. Improving is a big consulting company, well, medium-sized consulting company. We have offices all over North America, and we are continuing to expand. You may not have heard of us, but we do a lot of Scala work, especially out of the Ottawa office. We have about 110 engineers there. So we're maybe half the size of Sirius on many, many projects, though. I'm really happy to be here in New York City. The last time I did work in New York City was 2016. I've been coming here on and off on business and work trips since the 1990s, early 1990s. It's always been a great place to come and visit and hang out. Glad we got the opportunity to do this and to meet you all. A little background on me. I've been around the software game for a really long time. But let's take a little poll here. Who started using Scala first time they wrote any Scala after 2020? 1. Okay. 2. All right. Before 2020. Before 2017. I think we're down to about a little less than half, I'd say. 2015. Maybe 10%. 2013. 2 people. 2010. Actually, I wasn't before 2010. So that would be very, very early. I found Scala at a startup in Seattle called Performant. And we were injecting 12 terabytes a day of backups from client machines and turning them into virtual machine images so we could run them and fail over into the cloud. And we had our own cloud. And that was part of my responsibility, was managing the back-end storage for all that. We used ZFS. And a couple years into this startup's life, we were doing pretty well. We had thousands of customers. And the JVM started falling over on us because we were doing thread per request. And when you get to 11,000 threads in the JVM, you're mostly doing operating system context switching, and you're not doing any real work. You guys are probably familiar with this. I didn't know anything about akka or Scala or any of the asynchronous non-blocking things that have developed since, but I found out pretty quickly, and that was my beginning into it. The startup actually failed, sort of. It got acquired, but broken into little pieces, and the guy who was funding it decided not to put any more money into it. And I went on from there and just kept on learning Scala, learning about akka, learning functional programming, etc. Probably many of you have a similar kind of thing where there was a need. How many of you started Scala and all that it implies because there was a need at a job you were at? Well, not that many. I thought maybe more. That's kind of cool. Okay, so enough about the past. We're going to talk a little bit more about the future today. And I'm going to talk about Scala on 3 platforms. This is, so just so you know, I whipped this up in about a week. My buddy Johnny Catlett, who's somewhere around here, invited me to come and join him on this thing, and he said, "Yeah, but you got to do a presentation." So I thought, "Okay, sure, whatever." Okay, there we go. 3 platforms: JDK, JavaScript, and native, typically with the LLVM background. I worked on the LLVM PR project around the year 2000 with Chris Latner. So it's near and dear to my heart. I built a variable sized integer thing for it. And I've resisted JavaScript programming for a long time because, no offense, but it sucks. TypeScript's a whole lot better, but actually doing it in Scala would be even better. So I'm very much a Scala.js enthusiast. So I went out and did sort of a survey of the cross-platform matrix of languages and platforms, and Added a couple more, so WASM and .NET are there as well. And it just gave you this little presentation of the current state of work as of last week. So Scala, the current long-term support release is 3.3.3. Kotlin just released 2.0 within the last few weeks. Clojure's been a 1.2 and 1.12 for a while. Haxa, I didn't know anything about, but apparently it's in this category too because it does 3 platforms as well. Clojure doesn't do JavaScript, but it does do .NET, which is interesting. And WASM seems to be coming along. This is hot off the press. Scala.js just released, I think, on Friday or maybe on the weekend. I can't remember which day it was. But 1.17 came out with experimental support for WASM. So that's kind of cool. So the rest of this sort of gets into SBT and sort of how to. Maybe some comments at the end, but there's 2 ways. There's SBT cross project, which is provided by the portable Scala guys, and you need sort of 4 plugins for that. That wasn't acceptable to me, so I've created this thing called SBT Awesome Inc., which is not just supporting cross builds, but does now as well. That plugin sort of does a whole bunch of things and coalesces a bunch of plugins into lots of functionality in your SBT build. However, SBT Awesome Inc. uses SBT Cross Project and makes it a little simpler. The idea behind Awesome Inc. is to combine many SBT features into one plugin. So there's maybe 20 or 30 plugins that it pulls in, so you don't have to remember how to configure all of them. It just makes it simple through good old declarative functional programming. Access features declaratively and selectively, big issue for me there to just make SBT simpler. Here's an example, config for a project with SBT Awesome Inc. Let me see if I can actually read this because it's kind of thin. Okay, so there's a root thing. Those project level declarations come from Awesome Inc. So root is one of them. Another one is cross module. And you can see there's one module here that we're setting up, some utils library. Riddle's a project that I work on, so this is actually a real thing that I know and love. But it's a lot like a lot of things that you'd see in SBT where you have settings and you can run configuration functions. And what I've done is put in all these with functions. So configure with typical. Typical is the typical Scala setup. So Scala, in this case, Scala 3.4. And you need dependencies for Scala test and other things. Doesn't really set up the Scala C options well, so I added explain cyclic there. It runs build info, so we get some data as an object about the build, etc. And then it's similar for JVM and JS. So you can see that top project is aggregation only. All it does is aggregate, and it says with no publishing. In other words, there's nothing there that you can publish, and it sets up Scala so that it won't publish anything from that top level thing. The declared platforms are those 3 pink words at the end. The second argument list, so JVM, JS, native. And then those first 2 are like for all platforms, the common configuration. And then there's the JVM specific stuff and the JavaScript specific stuff and the native stuff. And this actually works a lot the same in SBT cross project, those same set of declarations. So as you can see, cross module returns a cross project, which leads to this thing at the end, which is sort of renaming things. So when you get a cross project, you get a sub project called JVM, JS, and native, one for each of the things you declared, JVM, JS, or native. And so, I just give them alternate names so I can zone in on a project if I want to test something specifically. So that's sort of how to set it up. As I was going through this, I ran into a number of issues. The first one is just sort of wrapping your mind around all this. So know your dependencies and your platforms. Like, what are you going to build, and what dependencies do you need? So just because a library is available on the JVM doesn't mean it's available on Scala.js or Scala Native. In fact, there's way more on the JVM than there will be for a while on these other platforms. That's not to say that it's empty, but there are things that you just can't take for granted. So research the available libraries on your target platforms before you choose to support non-JVM platforms, because if you don't, you will find that your whole programming model breaks because there's no support for it in that platform. Fortunately, the Scala index does a pretty good job of listing this out. You probably can't read those URLs, but I guess we can make these slides available to you somehow. So for Scala.js, there's an index. On Scala Native 0.5, there's an index. And then I made a list, and this actually took probably the most amount of time that I spent preparing this thing, of which ones support all three: JVM, JavaScript, and native. And that's the list. So you can see that Lee Howey's been busy with a few libraries. I'm very thankful that he ported FastParse to Scala.js because my library depends on it. But, there's JSON4S there, so you got a little bit of serialization. You got a few things from the type level stack, CAS, of course. And there's different things in type level that have been ported to Scala.js, but not Scala Native, or Scala Native, but not Scala.js. So it's a bit of a mixed model. Hopefully, over the next year or so, this will get sorted out. And there's a couple approaches to that. One is more and more people will just compile, use this cross-project thing and compile their project for Scala or for native and publish the libraries. The other approach that the Scala.js guys are taking is, well, maybe we can just suck in the bytecode from a JVM and crank out equivalent Scala code. And so they've been discussing that on Discord recently. And I think that's an interesting approach because it would sure save a lot of work. There are, I don't know, how many millions of Java libraries are there? Lots of them. Okay, next thing was code separation. So when you use this plugin, cross-platform or SBT Awesomig, it's going to generate these libraries for you, or these subdirectories, JS, JVM, native, and shared. It won't generate shared for you, but it'll generate JS and the target for all the JavaScript stuff, and a target directory for JVM and for native. And then your shared code should go in the shared folder. But you can put source code at any of those levels. Make sure you use the shared thing for truly portable stuff. It's really pretty much got to be pure Scala stuff that doesn't have an API. Because if you're going to use it in Scala.js, you need to use JS export. There is a sort of a wrapper library that's available for the JVM. And if you're going to do any kind of I/O, it's completely different on all three platforms. So you may have to write a high-level interface, as my utils class is for, or utils libraries for, is faking out I/O and doing it, writing the primitives once for the JVM, once for native, and once for JavaScript. Another thing is concurrency. Scala Native 0.5 supports concurrency, finally. That was the big thing with the 0.5 release. It made it doable for me because I depend on concurrency, as I'm sure all of you do, quite a bit. The JVM has been able to do that for a long time, but there's some caveats. JavaScript is not concurrent. You can fake it out, but when it's actually executing things, it's going to compile, it's going to execute one feature at a time, serially. There is actually no concurrent execution. So what they did was a very, very clever thing. If you declare your implicit global execution context, which I'm sure everybody's done here, then it actually equates to this JS execution context implicits queue, which just takes your future and puts it on the next input queue for JavaScript. So you can write concurrent code, it just won't execute concurrently on JavaScript, which allows you to have concurrent implementations of things that look like they're going to do concurrent things, but they won't on JavaScript. On Scala native, you're okay. It supports threads. It knows about concurrency. It will run things in parallel. And that's kind of just something you have to think about when you're going to write something that's going to be running on 3 platforms. Oh, and there's no support for synchronization primitives, so don't even think about using a lock. I mean, you'd be a bad Scala programmer if you did, so there's no need in Scala.js, and if you're using Scala well, you shouldn't really need to use any kind of synchronization primitive. Another gotcha that got me was, the 2% versus the 3%. If you guys have done any Scala.js stuff, you've probably run into this. So basically, native and JavaScript dependencies have to use 3% because they're going to put a little suffix in there, either native or SJS with the version on your dependency. And if you don't put that in, you'll get things like unresolved dependency symbols out of SBT. Can't find what you're talking about. Or if you get all the way to link time, either in JavaScript or native, you'll get undefined symbols at link time, and then it gets really hard to figure out, well, why? And one of the weirder ones I had, and sort of had to debate with the guys on Discord until they learned me, was that you can get all the way through the compilation and run your test case, and your test case says success, except it didn't run any test cases. And that was a little confounding for a while, but same problem. Just need one missing percent, and that solved that problem. Okay, so we're almost done. This was intended to be a very short thing. I was told I had 20 minutes. Well, not bad. Scala ecosystem support for 3 platforms continues to improve. So this has been around for a while, but for me, writing my project, it's like, okay, it's close enough to real that I can actually do this now. Currently quite usable, but there are quirks, as I've noted a few of them. You can get friendly help from Discord. The people there that are supporting these projects are very, very helpful. They've probably heard the same rookie questions over and over again, but they answer them politely and point you to the reference material that you need to bone up on. What are some of my expectations? So Scala will catch up and exceed Kotlin on platform support. I think right now Kotlin is sort of a little ahead of Scala. It generates for all 3 platforms and does so quite well. We're still sort of in the maturing stage of that, especially Scala native. But I expect that maybe over the next year it'll catch up. We'll get Scala native 1.0. We might even get Scala.js 2.0. The quirks will eventually all get resolved. I'm quite confident of that. SBT 2.0 has been a promise since March of last year. So theoretically, that's going to evolve sometime soon-ish, hopefully. It will be based on Scala 3, according to Eugene's prospectus for it a year and a half ago, which will be quite a win, I think. But it should also make the build specifications like that % problem. That's going to go away. That wasn't identified as a feature that just doesn't need to be there. And someday everyone will build for WASM targets anyways, so we'll see how that goes. Alrighty, that's it. I'm happy to take questions. Maybe you can talk to me directly. Well, I'll see if there's any questions you want to ask right now, and feel free to come up and talk to me afterwards too. All right, see you on the floor. Oh, there we go. Got one.
So I've been itching to get into Scala Native, but I always run into the issue of the library I need doesn't work for Scala Native. So that's why I never got into it. But if we do get there, do you foresee like UI frameworks being built around it, similar to how like Flutter does it on top of Dart? Because I would love to see that in Scala.
Yeah, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? I think everybody uses Electron. Yeah. But I think that would be a good idea. It'd be nice. In fact, maybe somebody could port Dart to Scala, and that would be a big job. But no, I haven't really given much contemplation to that. But I think it'd be cool if somebody did it. Yes.
Are you aware of what the blockers are for people compiling to using some esoteric feature that they cannot.
There are, at this point, with 1.16 and 1.17, there are very, very few Scala idioms that don't work. I think you run into two places. One is, yeah, the build, the horrible SBT build thing that you've got to deal with, which is why I started with that, because that was my stumbling block until I finally figured out how other people were doing it and looked at some projects. So definitely that made it easier. It made it doable, actually. There are some things like, forgetting to use a JS export annotation here and there. It's like, why can't I call that function from JavaScript? Well, because JavaScript doesn't know about it. So you find those things out of usage and during testing. It's definitely worth writing JavaScript test cases. Scala test does mostly work from Scala.js, which is, I find, unbelievable with the complexity of Scala tests. But, it's just a sort of a testament to how well they did the compiler there, that it actually can compile Scala tests to JavaScript. Hope that answers your question. Yes?
It has a lot of issues with, downloading, behind the corporate proxy, right? Downloading dependencies, when you're using SBT.
Yeah.
I think there have been a lot of breaks in the layout of the ID layout of the various artifact trees, right? For example, when SBT 1.0 was released, I think, the way you write the dependent, what do you call it? The way you write the ID repository, right? All those problems, have they been resolved? Because many times
Yeah.
you wouldn't just download.
Well, if you're using a corporate proxy, that may be the reason. But no, I don't get that kind of problem anymore. However, I have taught myself to update early, update frequently. Both the Scala plugin in IntelliJ and SBT versions, just take the new version every time it changes. Because that usually resolves most of the problems. In particular, the Scala 3 support in IntelliJ has really only gotten good this summer. The first half of this year was a nightmare. And then I talked to some people at JetBrains and they said, yeah, you probably want to get on the nightly build release. And that was amazing. Because, of course, they've run into every bug and problem that's coming up from millions of developers all over the world. And they fix them fairly quickly. So it's a bit of an intrusion to keep rebuilding your project daily as it was in the spring. That's settled down now. The Scala 3 support's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's usable. But no, I don't have any issues these days with dependencies. If I do, it's usually because I made a mistake. I just actually went into one this weekend, which was either my SBT Awesome Inc. plugin or one of the plugins it depends on was inserting a -js and then -sjs into the name of the plugin. And of course, when I generate the dependency from a different library, it doesn't expect that. So I had to rename things with the -js actually in my build.sbt. That stumped me for a while because you're looking through all the output of what gets published and you're looking for a 3-character difference. And I couldn't see it for a while. So that could be one of it. So you have to sort of rename the name variable in SBT to have the -js suffix, and then it'll work. Hope that helps. Yes?
What are some of the things that when you put in the work to target your game?
My project is a compiler. So I've written a language and I want to compile it. It's somewhat related to Smithy, which is why I got interested in Smithy tonight. So of course I want it to compile quickly. And I did this with GraalVM, and that was about 50x faster than the JVM. Probably because most of my runs of this little compiler are pretty short. And so the JVM has this huge startup cost, and you get the same performance. I really want that startup cost to go away. And I really hate GraalVM because it creates enormous executables. So I'd like to, not have a 68 megabyte executable and get somewhere under 20 megabytes, which Scala Native can do. So not so much because of Scala Native, because of LLVM. Now, I think actually those worlds are going to eventually converge. This is just a hunch that I have, but I think Oracle is moving towards, native compilation for Java being just an option on Java-C. You won't need a whole new JDK. Like there's a plan to merge JDK into OpenJDK. Sorry, GraalVM into OpenJDK. And it's like 25 or something. So it's out in the future a bit. So I'm just assuming from that piece of intel that yeah, everybody's on this sort of converging path, and then WASM's going to happen, and everybody's going to converge on that, and we'll see what happens. But it's the thing that I want to impress to you is like it's no longer as crazy hard and difficult as it used to be, because I've been trying to get Scala.js and Scala Native support for about 4 years, about as long as I've been building my project. So I just stopped at one point and just said, okay, fine, I'm just going to focus on the JVM for now, and we'll make progress with code. The Scala.js, so I got it's about 35,000 lines of code, a lot of it in FastParse. But that only took, it's about 2 weeks to convert to Scala.js. And that was also figuring out, build up the SBT, how to do these cross-project things. There was a lot more work on SBT than there was on actual Scala code. Other questions? Yes?
I have a question. Since you seem to be an open-minded person when you started your deck, like it's an LLVM, and even Chris Laffner now he's trying to promote Mojo,
Yep.
promote Python actually.
Yes.
He's an LLVM guy, inside out,
Yep.
and he was able to quickly jump in like that. And interestingly, Luca and Ben, when they were talking about, one of the questions was asked them why you guys are not promoting Scala.js for the UI. But their question was React, and it has a React manifesto underneath. So if philosophically, because everybody has to coexist, whether you like at the same time everybody's trying to converge and everything. But coexisting is going to be the game for a while, right? I mean, unless everything converges into something like that, like you said last kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So my question is that if you see React is trying virtual DOM, some techniques.
Yep.
Brilliant, right? So those kind of things you were saying about the DOM problems that you were going through, but they fixed it. And I don't say it's a holy grail, but what I'm saying is that do you need to be, we can be little less fanatical, don't you think? So trying to build everything like, everything has to be front end, back end, everything has to be in the same language. Doesn't have to be like that, right?
No. And many organizations like SiriusXM decided, look, let's pick the best language for a platform. I'm not sure I agree that TypeScript's the best language for front end, but whatever. They did. So no, I guess when I think about Converge, I think that it's going to be the usual thing. The best choice will win. It's not like it's going to be this mishmash of things. It's like somebody will finally create something that's like really good, and that one will get adopted. I'm building my own company separate from Improving, and we have decided to be completely Scala, front end, back end, everything. That's a product development thing I'm just sort of doing in my spare time. I can't hire any of you, but maybe someday. The trick there, that was actually quite a laborious decision, because I had always been thinking of the front end as well. It's probably TypeScript, and I'm so not. I mean, I've done TypeScript maybe one program in my life. It's okay. It's fine. But it's not Scala. And so I conned my son. No, actually, he really wanted to join me on this business venture, and he has since the summer. He's a 10-year veteran of UI only. And he works for Angel Studios, and he's done filmography with JavaScript and like really intense UI stuff. I taught him Scala in a few afternoons, like very rudimentary Scala. And he just loved even the IDE support. Like I start typing and it tells me what the arguments are supposed to be with their types. And he had never had that kind of support before. It's like, really? Like JavaScript's that bad? He goes, this is revolutionary. Like, I love Scala just for that. So, I mean, that's a tooling thing, but it just all makes sense to him. And now he's going to try and convert Angel Studios to get off their TypeScript habit and use Scala.js. And he's not just a Joe Blow there. He's like their lead architect. So, we'll see if he's successful. There's a lot of, there needs to be business reasons, like Ben said, to do that. But, he's going to try and make a case for it.
One small one, since you said TypeScript. Have you tried PureScript?
Sorry, which? My lack of UI knowledge. That doesn't ring a bell for me.
They tried PureScript kind of. I don't know.
It's like Haskell.
Yeah.
But under JavaScript.
I don't know. I don't know what they did at Angel. You'd have to ask him.
It's very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been a back-end guy my whole career. So I gave up on UIs when the web happened. It's just got too complicated. It's like, really? Like, this is the way we're doing it now. It used to be nice. There was a simple little API in C++, and we just like motif. I don't even do X motif. Like, anyways, those are the old days. But it's sort of working its way back to that, where we can get a consistent API.
No, it's intended on your platform. What you're doing is amazing. Like, that's what even I think Professor Martin Odensky was trying initially for the JVM. And then when we started.
Yeah.
What you're doing is amazing. Just I'm saying coexisting.
Right.
Unary
Yeah. Yeah, and I think coexistence is probably going to continue for the next 5 years. By then maybe AI has put us all out of work. I don't know, but we'll see. But, there are people working on these things, and I'm working on, a tool as well. And I have been my entire life driven by efficiency, which in the early days meant I did a lot of performance analysis and big projects and was really optimizing things. In fact, I remember one of my New York gigs was for MetLife. They had you guys know the JVM, the property stack? You can have a property and its backup value. Well, if every time you set a value, you set a backup value, you end up with a big chain. And it just grows and grows and grows. So they were doing this, and it happened to be the Newline character. And so they were getting this in all kinds of places, and after a while, it didn't fail right away, but they get a Stack Overflow error because they did 50,000 function calls recursively, and they couldn't figure it out. Anyways, we built a tool back then to help them with that. And anyways, I've been focusing on performance for a long time, but now I have completely shifted gears out of all that low-level nitty-gritty stuff into how about we optimize the front end? Like, let's take a CEO's concept or CIO's concept or CTO's concept of what the technology platform should be. And let's have a way to specify that. So that's kind of where I'm working on now, trying to optimize software. What created that was all this AI code generation. If we could actually get AI to generate the code, then we can work at a much higher level of abstraction. And for me, it would be much more satisfying, because I have spent my days and nights and weekends and weeks in debuggers, and I'm over it. I want clean code generated, and it should just work. But that's the dream. Other questions?